Admitted. The Strange Tale of Depsey the Rabbit. Chapter 23. Visions and the Final Understanding. The dimensional static felt different this time. Where his first journey through the portal had been violent displacement, reality tearing like wet paper, this return carried the weight of knowledge. Depsey moved through the green-tinged void between worlds with enhanced understanding, burning through his cartoon physiology like acid. The guilt visions came immediately, but they weren't the fragmented phantoms he'd experienced in Chapter 12. These were precise, surgical in their clarity, enhanced by his time among the victims and his witness to the cosmic horror's true scope. Flash. His yellow shoe making contact with Mr. Muffin's back. But now he could see the dimensional consequences rippling outward from that moment. The portal technology that would later corrupt souls. The worship theology that would comfort victims. The systematic infrastructure built on that first betrayal. Flash. The letter signature, servants of the row job. But now the words carried their full weight, not mysterious authority, but cosmic hierarchy reaching down through dimensions to harvest innocence from real people in the real world. Flash. Chuck's trusting smile from those poker games, but now Depsey understood what friendship actually meant versus the systematic exploitation he'd mistaken for relationship. 20 years of using Chuck's loyalty as cover for murder, and Chuck had never stopped believing in their bond. Flash. His own reflection drinking the blood money ink, watching his eyes change, but now comprehending how the protection had isolated him from moral consequences, not just guilt suppression, but complete disconnection from the human cost of every elimination. Flash. Victim after victim falling into the green void, one after another across 2 decades, but now each face connected to the broadcasting expansion. Each death enabling more efficient corruption of those who trusted cartoon entertainment to be safe. The dimensional passage contracted around him like a birth canal, reality asserting itself with increasing pressure. But the enhanced understanding wouldn't fade. Every choice he'd made, every life he'd taken, every friend he'd betrayed, it all served a machine designed to harvest the innocence of actual hearts. Every corrupted soul is my fault, he whispered into the green static, his voice lost in the cosmic roar but not in his own awareness. Every one of them. The portal expelled him onto concrete that felt more solid than cartoon reality should allow. His yellow shoes struck pavement with authority that spoke of fundamental change. The rift had made him more real, more consequential, less able to dismiss the weight of his choices as cartoon physics. Broadcasting towers rose around him like a metal forest, their humming frequency making his teeth ache with recognition. This wasn't the cartoon world he'd left. This was a systematized version, optimized for corruption transmission, his former reality transformed into an efficient factory for enhancement and exploitation. And somewhere in this perfect nightmare, Chuck and Lucy were hiding from the reputation he'd built, in danger from the system he'd served, carrying trauma he'd enabled through 20 years of murder. The blood money in his pocket felt heavier now, not protection, but evidence. Evidence of complicity, evidence of choice, evidence that he'd had alternatives all along, but had taken the coward's path every single time. I have to find them, he said to the geometric streets, to the synchronized, enhanced citizens, to the broadcasting equipment that pulsed with blue malevolence. I have to save them from what I created. But first, he had to understand exactly what he'd been serving all these years. The origin story Chuck had been seeking, the first betrayal that had enabled everything since. He needed that truth before he could offer anything resembling redemption. The enhanced understanding burned in his mind like cosmic fire, showing him fragments of possibility. An innocent friendship, a moment of choice, the first push that had started the entire machine of horror. He walked deeper into the optimized city. Every step, a declaration that the blood money's protection no longer mattered as much as the eternal souls it had been used to harm. 2 hours later, in a basement that smelled of ink and desperation, the knock came softly, almost apologetically, as if the visitor understood she was intruding on grief too large for interruption. Chuck looked up from his obsessive sketching, the same vision fragments drawn and redrawn, analyzed and reanalyzed, connected by increasingly frantic lines that led nowhere. The projector, the ink, and the robot sat quietly mocking his every attempt to unsee the truth. Lucy sat in the corner she had claimed as her own, porcelain surface reflecting nothing because she had turned away from every light source. She hadn't spoken about Drake since they fled the theater. Hadn't spoken much at all. Chuck understood. What words existed for watching someone who had been courting you with sweet awkwardness get murdered by a friend who didn't even remember doing it? Drake's earnest smile, his genuine offers to help, the way Lucy's cheeks had flushed whenever he appeared, all of it ended in seconds, and the killer had wept over his body with authentic grief. Lucy moved toward the basement stairs with the careful grace of someone who had learned that sudden movements attracted attention from enhanced patrol units. Through the small window, they could see Pearl's distinctive silhouette. The white rotary telephone's professional posture somehow diminished, her usual efficient confidence replaced by something that looked like defeat. Chuck? Lucy? Pearl's voice carried through the door with professional control, barely masking personal devastation. I have something that belonged to Detective Bones. I thought you might know what to do with it. Chuck's yellow surface had grown paler over the weeks of hiding. His perpetual smile now a thin line of determined optimism fighting against cosmic horror. He opened the door to find Pearl holding a cardboard evidence box with hands that trembled just slightly. The only sign of emotion her professional training couldn't suppress. He never came home from that last investigation, she said, without preamble, because police operators learned to deliver bad news efficiently. The chamber beneath the playhouse. He was so close to proving everything. Lucy's porcelain features reflected the basement's harsh fluorescent lighting in patterns that made her look fractured, even when she wasn't. Pearl, I'm so sorry. We should have... No. Pearl's interruption carried the authority of someone who had spent 15 years managing emergency calls. He knew the risks. He made the choice. But I don't know what to do with his final evidence. And I remember you asking about Professor Gosling and broadcasting equipment. You were the only one who seemed to understand what he was working on. She held out the box with both hands, a formal transfer of responsibility. Inside, nestled among crime scene photographs and handwritten notes, sat a film reel that looked older than anything else in Detective Bones's collection. The label, written in faded ink, read, Origins, Handle with Care, Mr. Mystery Personal Collection. Found this in that hidden chamber, Pearl continued, her voice carrying the weight of a widow who hadn't been allowed the luxury of being a widow because they'd never been officially married. Thought you'd know how to view it. The detective, he died trying to understand what you're all caught up in. Chuck accepted the box, with the reverence due to a fallen friend's final testament. The projector sat ready in the corner. Professor Gosling's lessons about broadcasting theory had led to equipment acquisition, hours of practice, technical understanding that now felt like preparation for this exact moment. He was a good man, Chuck said, his voice carrying more weight than cartoon vocal cords were designed to support. He deserved better than what this system does to people who try to expose it. Pearl nodded curtly, professional composure cracking just enough to show the grief underneath. Do what you think he'd want. Honor his work. I have to get back. They're asking questions about his disappearance, and I need to buy you time by giving them bureaucratic answers. She turned to leave, then paused at the threshold. "Chuck, Lucy, be careful. Whatever that film shows, the detective died for it. That means it's either very important or very dangerous. Probably both." The door closed with the soft click of someone who had learned to be invisible in a world where visibility meant targeting. Chuck and Lucy stood alone in the basement with Detective Bones's final evidence, surrounded by the equipment they'd gathered during weeks of investigation, the projector, the ink residue that still enhanced Chuck's perception, the toy robot's mechanical components integrated into their makeshift laboratory. Everything they needed to view the film was already present. Everything except the courage to see what truth had cost Detective Bones his life. Chuck lifted the film reel with hands that shook slightly. The moment his cartoon fingers made contact with the canister, the residual ink in his system, blood money traces absorbed during their investigation, activated with a sensation like cold electricity running through his yellow form. The same vision fragments crashed over him, but this time they carried partial understanding, like puzzle pieces beginning to show their intended picture. Lucy's porcelain cracking under harsh spotlight, not abstract destruction, but recognition that it would happen during some future performance breakdown, when truth could no longer be contained by entertainment. Chuck surrounded by screens showing terrified faces. The wall of screens they'd witnessed, but now, understanding those faces belonged to viewers being systematically corrupted by broadcasting technology. Depsey with wrong eyes, too perfect smile, not their friend at all, but some enhanced replacement using his identity, his reputation, his relationships as tools for system expansion. Their own hands reaching desperately for something just out of frame. Reaching for this exact moment, this film reel, this evidence that might explain how everything started. A voice saying, "Welcome to your perfect birthday." Not celebration, but artificial performance. Enhanced Depsey's mechanical delivery of joy, optimized for corruption transmission. People's faces reflected in blue light, eyes glassy and distant. The real victims, actual living beings whose innocence was being systematically harvested by the entertainment they trusted. Detective Bones on an operating table. Dr. Dinglegreen holding scalpel. No longer nightmare imagery, but prophetic understanding of how his investigation would end, why he never came home, what price the system demanded from those who got too close to truth. Broadcasting towers growing like metal trees across cityscape, not metaphor, but literal description of what was happening to their world, while they hid in basements and tried to process horror too large for cartoon minds to contain. "Chuck!" Lucy's voice cut through the vision cascade, her porcelain hands gripping his yellow arms with desperate strength. "Chuck, you're shaking! What did you see?" Chuck forced his eyes to focus on his friend's concerned face, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time in weeks. The visions hadn't been random fragments or meaningless nightmares. They'd been warnings, prophecies, previews of a future that was rapidly becoming present. "I wanted truth," he said, his voice barely functional through the weight of enhanced understanding. "But I'm getting more than I can handle. Every piece I understand makes the whole picture worse." Lucy studied his expression with the careful attention of someone who had learned to read trauma in the faces of friends she couldn't protect. "Chuck, maybe we shouldn't watch this. Look what the last visions did to you. Detective Bones died finding this. Maybe he'd want us to destroy it, not view it." "Detective Bones died to get us this evidence," Chuck replied, lifting the film canister with renewed determination, despite the enhanced terror burning through his cartoon physiology. "We have to honor that. We can't let his sacrifice be meaningless." "But what if understanding makes everything worse? What if this knowledge destroys us the way it destroyed him?" Chuck looked at the projector, at the film reel, at the basement laboratory they'd built from desperation and hope. Outside, Broadcasting towers hummed with malevolent efficiency. Enhanced citizens moved through their optimized routines. Real people somewhere beyond dimensional barriers watched cartoon entertainment that was systematically changing their hearts and minds. "Then at least we'll know what we're fighting," he said finally. "At least we'll understand what Detective Bones died trying to prove." Lucy's porcelain features reflected the basement lighting in patterns that showed her internal struggle. Protective instincts warring with recognition that some truths couldn't be avoided forever, only delayed until they became more dangerous. "If we watch this," she said slowly, "there's no going back to not knowing. Whatever we see, we'll have to live with it forever." Lucy rolled the toy robot in her porcelain fingers, looking at its structure and coming to a realization of its otherworldly mechanics. Chuck watched Lucy, understanding the weight of her warning, but also understanding the weight of Detective Bones' sacrifice, the weight of corrupted minds, the weight of a system that thrived on ignorance and collapsed under scrutiny. "Some questions are more dangerous than ignorance," he admitted, threading the film into the projector with hands steadied by purpose. "But maybe some answers are worth any risk." The projector clicked to life, its beam cutting through the basement darkness. On the makeshift screen, black and white images began to dance. Innocent, nostalgic, carrying the aesthetic weight of entertainment from a more honest age. Lucy settled beside Chuck as the title card unfurled with cheerful pride. "Joko Raccoon and Mr. Muffins spend a day at the coast." "Detective Bones," Chuck whispered to the darkness, "we're going to understand what you died for." The film began to play, carrying with it the weight of friendship, betrayal, and the first moment when love became insufficient in the face of cosmic ambition. In the basement laboratory, surrounded by the tools of investigation and the residue of truth-seeking, two friends prepared to learn how innocence could be transformed into systematic evil, and why that knowledge was worth dying for.